Hello everyone and welcome back to another week here at the Damage Report. It's Monday and thank God for that, because with each Monday we get a little bit of Francesca Fiorentini. Francesca, how's it going?
How's it doing? Top of the doing to you.
You're so good. Colorful today.
Yes, I had to be. I am in my mom's house, so trying not to spread too many germs. No, I've got tested and stuff. So I don't know how this has to do with colorful. It's her birthday, so yeah, gotta be bright and happy and sunny.
For the birthday, I'm wearing one of the Shop TYT. If you can read this, you're not practicing social distancing shirt, because I feel like me wearing this shirt with this sort of subtle message to socially distance is now the only thing America is doing to stop the spread of the pandemic.
You're really
it's
doing
dark
your part.
out there. I am. And we're gonna be talking about that a little bit, as well as so much else, because what do you know? Just a couple of weeks out from the election, a lot's going on with the legal effort, the elite strike force, and the attempts to overturn different state results. We're gonna be talking about those, as well as Joe Biden choosing the sort of cabinet that you would expect if you were familiar with Joe Biden. So we're gonna be talking about that. That's gonna be fun. And for those of you who are already here, first of all, apologies for the late start. We're having some tech problems. God only knows what they are. Every day is a fresh hell. But we're ready to go now, and there's a lot we're gonna be talking about. And along the way, if you could just hit that little like button, maybe share the stream as well, more people can join us. And if you send us messages, we will be chatting along with you as we go. That said, before we jump into it, Francesca, what can people expect from yesterday's edition of the Bitchuation Room?
You're so sweet. It was a great conversation with John Fugelsang, comedian and host of SiriusXM, and also Erica Andiola of Raíces, Texas. So we talked all about immigration. We talked about John's favorite subject, which is Jesus. And
he does like talking about Jesus.
Oh my God, he loves talking about Jesus. But it's like the good part of Jesus. Mostly just abs. We mostly talked about abs, and it was great. And Thanksgiving, and of course, Sidney Powell's career, which I know we're gonna talk about here as well.
Oh, indeed we are. In just a little bit, you won't have to wait too long. But before we get to that, let's get to something that I believe is probably important. Most of the country seems to have moved on from this, but I'm still worried about it, so we're gonna jump into it. As we entered into the weekend, we knew that Donald Trump was gonna be meeting with the leaders of the Michigan State Republican Party with the obvious, explicit, sole goal of getting them to help him with whatever shenanigans are necessary to overturn the will of the people in Michigan, which voted overwhelmingly for Joe Biden to win. They want to just ignore that and give the Electoral College votes to Donald Trump. So these two Republicans, Senate Majority Leader Mike Shirkey, as well as Michigan House Speaker Lee Chatfield, traveled to meet Donald Trump for this meeting. And obviously coming out of it, there's a lot of concerns about what they talked about. Well, they were a bit mum initially. Mike Shirkey didn't answer questions at the airport. He sang a little bit from a religious hymn. So that's not terrifying at all, that your only response after having a meeting about a possible coup is you start singing stuff out of your religion. That's great. That's what I wanted. But the next day, Lee Chatfield was on Fox and Friends. This is just yesterday. And so Lee Chatfield wants to reassure everyone that this is not about a coup. Take a look.
To make that request to the president, was happy to do that. But there was this outrage that the president was gonna ask us to break the law and he was gonna ask us to interfere, and that just simply didn't happen, Pete. So I was happy to meet with the president, happy to talk with him, and to kind of give him an update on what's going on in the state of Michigan.
So there was an update given, but this whole conspiracy that he's trying to twist your arm to disenfranchise voters, not true.
That's simply not true, Pete. I mean, when the president calls, you take that meeting.
Okay, so that is not the last video from that we're gonna play, but I just want you to understand. So Pete Hegseth is reassuring his viewers that it's just a conspiracy theory, Francesca, that Donald Trump, who is openly talking, like all of like his favorite people in media, the advisors speaking to reporters, all of them are saying this is about overturning the results.
10 minutes ago.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Pete Hegseth wants that to happen, but just conspiracy theory, and it's not gonna happen, right?
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, let's get to the, this is let's talk about the real news, like the underground layer of child sex slaves from QAnon. Like hard news, not the conspiracies. Like Trump is openly trying to discredit a Democratic election before our very eyes. Conspiracy. Like what?
Yeah. Well, and the thing is, you only had a few seconds before that video continued. I swear to God, this is like 30 seconds after the cut of the video you just saw. Lee Chatfield goes on about the conspiracy theory to take the popular vote and not respect it. That's not gonna happen, but maybe this will.
But the way that we have set it up here in the state of Michigan, our state law is that, as you mentioned, it is 2 Republicans and 2 Democrats, and they certify the election for whoever won the popular vote. Now, as you mentioned, the RNC and the MRP have both made a request to simply delay that certification for 2 weeks until there can be a full and complete audit done in Wayne County. Pete, we have 71% of the precincts in Wayne County, their absentee ballots books don't match what's on the rolls. And that's very concerning. That's why the legislature, we've been doing our own investigations. We've been doing our own reviews of these reports of fraud and the reports of irregularities. And I think these need to be looked into. So Pete, as you mentioned, if there were to be a 2-2 split on the State Board of Canvassers, it would then go to the Michigan Supreme Court to determine what their response would be, what their order would be. If they didn't have an order that it be certified, well, now we have a constitutional crisis in the state of Michigan that's never occurred before, because as the federal constitution says, this is left up to the state legislatures.
Yeah.
The state legislature decided long ago to do it this way. So if this way doesn't work, obviously now we have questions that have arisen in Michigan for the very first time in our state.
Yeah, you're talking about tens of thousands of votes potentially.
Okay, so we're like 45 seconds out of it's a conspiracy theory that they would ever overturn the vote. And that's not why I went to talk with Donald Trump. I went to talk to him about, well, he doesn't actually say. He doesn't say what they supposedly actually talked about. We're just supposed to fill in the blanks. And then he says, well, it's gonna come down to 2-2 Republican Democrat. And if there's a split, which means the Republicans vote against it, he's not filling that in, but that's the truth. Then it would go to the Supreme Court, and depending on what the Supreme Court says, then maybe the legislature just gets to decide who wins. But wait, you were just saying, no, nothing crazy, no coup, no stealing the election. And then he reassured Fox viewers, oh no, there's a path that results in Joe Biden not winning these votes if Republicans manipulate every step along the way.
Yeah. Say the captain of the water polo team, and the state legislature is gonna have to just like do an audit of all of Wayne County. All the black voters. What? No, just Wayne County. No, it's about race. It's probably about race. Look, you can't trust them. Like, honestly, he is basically like, yeah, no, there's no coup. But here is the way we get to a coup. And now I've got to go train for my water polo championship.
Exactly. So, there it is. Like, I guess, look, if you watch the show every day, do you need to see Lee Chatfield say that? I suppose not. We were talking about the possibility that they could do something like this for 2 months before the election. It seemed like a crazy long shot because it should be. Lee Chatfield, among other Michigan state Republican leaders, has been saying for weeks since the election that we would never defy the will of the people. But what do you know? They meet with Donald Trump for the explicit purpose of overthrowing the will of the people. And now he's talking about, well, maybe it's not as simple as Donald Trump getting his butt kicked. Maybe you gotta get the Supreme Court involved, and maybe we gotta get the legislature involved to theoretically throw it to him. Now, again, as we've said many times, even if they were to do this, that by itself does not make Donald Trump president, because again, Donald Trump didn't narrowly lose this thing. He lost 306 to whatever, a gap that they had described after 2016 as landslide, blowout, historic. But it is a reminder of how fundamentally opposed to democracy this party is, that they will do this historic thing of overturning state results, even if that just has to be part of their overall plot to actually make Donald Trump get his second term.
Yeah, you gotta wonder what, I think they're just filling time. I think it's like, fill time until Pompeo and Trump launch a nuclear war on Iran, and then we'll have plenty to talk about. But like, it's like, yeah, I get your end game is overturning the will of the people and this entire election. But you're only one state, and you're actually not that important of a state at this point. So are you setting up a model? Like, what is it? So I do think it is, a Bannonite, flooding the whatever with the, S words. Does that make any sense? Flooding the whatever with S words?
I sort of get what you mean. Yeah.
Whatever Bannon meant by that, just distracting people,
Yeah, maybe. And I mean, I don't know. I know which is worse substantively, that they'd be doing all of this to actually steal this election. But all of the, aides talking to Washington Post reporters behind the scenes are saying, yeah, Donald Trump's just not really sure like what he's gonna do with his life after. And he's like trying to figure out, is he gonna give speeches? Is he gonna run again? And he just wants more time, and he really likes the spotlight. So he'll drag us through weeks of an attempted coup because he's not sure if he wants to do Dancing with the Stars or do speeches to corporate boardrooms.
Oh, definitely.
I don't know which of those is worse.
Definitely.
Oh my God, can you imagine? He just comes out and does his little thing.
Oh yeah, he'll do this, and it'll be flamenco because then you get to wear heels, so suddenly his heels won't be as weird.
And they'll still be a little bit weird. Anyway, okay, well that's one aspect of what's going on. Even you look ridiculous doing it, let alone him.
Oh come on, I make it look good. I'm about to TikTok this.
Perhaps. Oh my God, that 100 million views right there.
The lips, like just put some maracas in my hand.
Oh God. That's the thing, you can Photoshop anything you want in, as I have seen on Twitter when he's done that in the past.
We need to talk about a relatively new show called the Republic, or UNFTR. As a Young Turks fan, you already know that the government, the media, and corporations are constantly peddling lies that serve the interests of the rich and powerful. But now there's a podcast dedicated to unraveling those lies, debunking the conventional wisdom. In each episode of the Republic, or UNFTR, the host delves into a different historical episode or topic that's generally misunderstood or purposely obfuscated by the so-called powers that be. Featuring in-depth research, razor-sharp commentary, and just the right amount of vulgarity, the UNFTR podcast takes a sledgehammer to what you thought you knew about some of the nation's most sacred historical cows. But don't just take my word for it. The New York Times described UNFTR as consistently compelling and educational, aiming to challenge conventional wisdom and upend the historical narratives that were taught in school. For as the great philosopher Yoda once put it, you must unlearn what you have learned. And that's true whether you're in Jedi training or you're uprooting and exposing all the propaganda and disinformation you've been fed over the course of your lifetime. So search for UNFTR in your podcast app today and get ready to get informed, angered, and entertained all at the same time.
Last week, America was forced to learn who Sidney Powell was, and it was a rude awakening because this lawyer, this person with a law degree, is talking about how Hugo Chavez is responsible for Joe Biden winning and everything. Well, look, if you have been wondering along the way, as we've been going through all of what passes for American politics over the past few years, is there a line for the Trump camp? We apparently might have found it because Sidney Powell has been ejected from the campaign bus, which then backed up and then rolled over her. The Trump campaign on Sunday sought to distance itself from attorney Sidney Powell after she made a series of increasingly convoluted and baseless allegations of widespread national election fraud. That's not exactly why they're doing it, because they're all doing that. But Powell, who also represents former National Security Advisor Michael Flynn, had appeared with campaign lawyers at press events as recently as last week. It's really this is important that we not skip over this, because you remember this little clip?
This is an elite strike force team that is working on behalf of the president and the campaign to make sure that our Constitution is protected.
Okay, so that was funny at the time, but as I read this next graphic, bear in mind, the person hovering directly behind Jenna Ellis is Sidney Powell. So remember that as they put out a campaign statement saying Sidney Powell is practicing law on her own. She is not a member of the Trump legal team. She is also not a lawyer for the president in his personal capacity, according to Rudy Giuliani, who was also standing on the stage with her at that thing. Now, in a statement issued to CBS News, Ms. Powell said that she understood the statement from Mr. Giuliani and Jenna Ellis, and that she would still be filing a lawsuit related to her allegations of voter fraud on her own. She seems a little bit confused, which again, I sort of understand, because as you can see in this photo from that same event, she not only stood behind Jen Ellis, she addressed the nation with Rudy Giuliani, with Jen Ellis as a member in good standing as of that moment of the elite strike force. And now it's like, Sidney who? Powell what? We don't know anything about her. You did.
You know, you gotta wonder though, like Giuliani just melting into tar, like going down like the Penguin in Batman wasn't enough, or standing in front of a landscaping company going, the polls, all the polls, you know, like, or standing next to Eric or whatever he was doing, like that wasn't enough. No. But suddenly Sidney Powell, and we know what's so funny about this is I feel like Sidney Powell wasn't fired because she said nutso stuff, right? She said that there was gonna be a biblical lawsuit filed in Georgia shortly. She said Hugo Chavez rigged the election in some, inception, of South America, some socialist inception, which I'm all about, BT dubs, that's what we're here doing or what I'm doing. But like, she said all these crazy things, but what's so funny is she didn't make it enough about the president. And didn't make it enough about Trump. And like going back and being like, why have people been fired? Why was Giuliani fired way back when? It's because he started to get on his own high horse and started to make it about him, right? Sidney Powell starts going off saying random stuff, but she never kept coming back to like this president, his strength, his integrity, his economy, like the way that every other sycophant does. She started going off the deep end. So I'm feeling like it wasn't even that she said outlandish stuff. It was just that she didn't make it enough about Trump. And also, let's be real, she's a 4, okay? And she doesn't have the scarves that Dr. Birx has. If you get some scarves, maybe you'll look better, cover up the face. Like this, it's gotta be something petty. That's why she was fired. It wasn't because she was just spewing lies.
Yeah, Trump thinks of her the way Hassan thinks of Dax Shepard as of today. But anyway, look, you might be right. Yeah, it's not just loyalty to the president. That's the shorthand we use. That means not going against him. But it's not just loyalty to the president. It's obsession with the president, which has to go beyond that. As Sidney Powell goes off down that dusty trail, maybe with Trump, you never know, she could be back in a week. Let's remember some of her wilder times, including this appearance right here.
Georgia's probably gonna be the first state I'm gonna blow up, and Mr. Kemp and the Secretary of State need to go with it because they're in on the Dominion scam with their last minute purchase or award of a contract to Dominion of $100 million. The State Bureau of Investigation for Georgia ought to be looking into the financial benefits received by Mr. Kemp and the Secretary of State's family about that time. And another benefit Dominion was created to award is what I would call election insurance. That's why Hugo Chavez had it created in the first place. But I also wonder where he got the technology, where it actually came from, because I think it's hammer and scorecard from the CIA.
Just to clarify, you're saying that Governor Kemp, who's been a longtime ally of the president, is directly involved because of financial benefit in the conspiracy to defeat the president in Georgia?
We have certainly been told that there is evidence of that, and it would warrant an investigation if anybody were actually going to do an honest investigation.
What more could you tell us about that alleged conspiracy? Is the governor's involvement?
I can't give you any more details on that now, but it would certainly warrant an investigation. If it had been reported to me as a law enforcement officer, I would be investigating it steadfastly.
I know you say you want to do your arguing in court. You are an attorney, you're not a press secretary, but you all did have a press conference last week. Jordan Sekelo said that there's going to be a filing soon in Georgia that would be explosive. Can you tell us anything? Can you make some news with us here tonight? Tell us anything new that you're going to present in that filing in Georgia.
Well, I can't say that yet. But hopefully this week we will get it ready to file.
Sidney,
it will be biblical.
it'll be mostly in her head. I don't know. So imagine that, like, hey, I can't like give you my evidence. I don't want to reveal everything. I'm not a press secretary, even though I do appearances for the press all the time. I just want to casually throw out that Brian Kemp is a commie spy, but don't ask any follow-ups. I don't want to go into it. We got to wait before court for that. That video could potentially be why they threw her to the side. Like, Brian Kemp is 100% an ally of Donald Trump. And right. She's effectively saying he's a plant of Hugo Chavez.
Yeah. Well, is this the Kraken? I'm waiting for the Kraken. We gotta dig up Hugo Chavez's body. But you gotta get through the moat of dead people that they have there. Oh, you mean in the United States, the 250,000 plus people who've died from? No, I mean the communist moats. Anyway, like what? Like she is. Look, if you look up Galaxy Brain, I think you see Sidney Powell just working through stuff. She is a beautiful, mushy mind. That's all it is.
Okay, let me ask you a question. So we played that. So look, we're not gonna know for sure, but I am interested in your perspective. Rudy Giuliani has said insane things. Jenna Ellis has said insane things, and they have been elevated by Donald Trump in recent weeks, not thrown aside. Sidney Powell's the only one that's been thrown aside. I mean, lots of lawyers have fled for the hills because this entire thing is a joke, but she had to be thrown, and she's still gonna be doing her stuff. Whatever you just saw there, the biblical stuff, she's still gonna be doing that. So what is your idea of why she was fired? Was it the Brian Kemp stuff? Was it that the Hugo Chavez stuff was a bridge too far, which seems perfectly in line with Fox News? I don't know. Was it the weird back and forth with Tucker Carlson, or was it something else? Why did she cross a line that doesn't seem to exist for anyone else?
I said it earlier, but I do think that it's because she didn't make her conspiracies enough about Trump.
Yeah.
Like, she can make up whatever she wants, but she still has to come back to the fact that Trump is president now. He thinks he won. Obviously, he knows he didn't, but just keep on hammering it. Like, our great and glorious leader. Like, don't make it about Chavez, make it about Trump. Also, yeah, a little bit of a bridge too far. And I will just say, she might be fired, but she's absolutely going to keep working at the behest and like on behalf of the Trump administration. Like, they're just distancing themselves from her, but she's still gonna be out there, right? But once they take her away, they just sort of surgically put Ivanka's face onto her, do a little The Swan on Fox News, on Fox. If anyone watched that reality show where they give a full body makeover, make her look hot, and then she can say whatever she wants.
Yeah.
And it's feminism.
I guess. Well, let's check in just briefly with Donald Trump and see what he thinks about all this. All of this insane legal back and forth is ostensibly at the behest of Donald Trump, for the benefit of Donald Trump. So Sidney Powell being ejected, I guess, is what he wants, even though just a week ago he was tweeting things like, I look forward to Mayor Giuliani spearheading the legal effort to defend our right to free and fair election. Rudy Giuliani, Joseph Digenova, Victoria Toensing, Sidney Powell, and Jenna Ellis, a truly great team added to our other wonderful lawyers and representatives. Some of them I think have since quit, one now has been fired. And apparently, although he will never, he doesn't like to admit generally why he fires people. He automatically goes to either doesn't say anything, or he says they were a joke and nobody respected them. Why did I hire them? I don't know. Ask a different question. They've never been respected. That's always what he says. But behind the scenes, he apparently has been agitated about Mr. Giuliani and Sidney Powell for a few days, according to his advisors, complaining about how Ms. Powell had sounded at the Thursday news conference, how black rivulets of liquid had dripped down Mr. Giuliani's face, and about how long the appearance had stretched out. It was very boring. I was very bored.
There were no pictures.
There were more charts, please.
Yeah, make it like a karaoke song with put the lyrics at the bottom, have a little bouncing ball, and then I could sing along. Yeah, and this, John, we're talking about a guy who was who is mad that someone's speech went on for too long. Mr. Like what, 4+ hour rallies?
Exactly. It was long though. And so advisors over the weekend were telling him to get rid of her. Well, this is a great quote. One of those people said that even Mr. Giuliani had recognized that she had gone too far. I love that is an own of Sidney Powell, but more importantly, an own of Rudy Giuliani, that like, oh my God, Rudy Giuliani gets that she's crazy. That's not a good sign if it's gotten through to him. Yeah, and so I guess she's gonna be going. Like, he was very happy to have her up until recently, but just standing on the stage and talking about Hugo Chavez and like the legions of the damned and all that, that's not good. That's not gonna win you any cases. And especially if this is not about actual legal victories, which it doesn't seem like it could possibly be, if this is just about creating the right narrative going forward for Trump with whatever he's going to transition to, he doesn't need that. He doesn't need Sidney Powell. That's too much.
Yeah. Agreed.
I mean, she's press conference. We don't know.
She's fun. I just like every time there's someone fun in the Trump administration, they always get fired. You know, like Scaramucci got fired way too soon, 3 days. I was super excited about him. I was like, yes, Italian jokes. I'm here for him. And then they get fired. And I'm just like, Sidney Powell was super fun, you know, just spewing the most random stuff. And then she gets let go. Ugh. Like, yeah. God.
I think that's probably what it is. And let's also remember one of the things she said was that the results of the states that voted against Trump should be overturned and the votes should be given to Trump, which Pete Hegseth describes as a conspiracy theory. Trump's lawyer was saying that in media appearances up until the moment she was fired. So bear that in mind. Ted Cruz is not a tough guy. He never has been, never will be, but he does like playing a tough guy every once in a while in campaign commercials or on Twitter, where he doesn't have to try to deliver it with what as straight of a face as he can have. He tweeted this: "Come and take it with a turkey and a star." Cause like their big battle is not against COVID, it's against people who don't want you to kill your grandma at Thanksgiving dinner. And he's a tough guy. Come and take my turkey and I'm gonna do something. What would Ted Cruz do, honestly? No, like seriously, I'm asking you, whether you're a lefty watching this or conservative, you know it. He wouldn't do a damn thing. I could walk in there, I could take the turkey, I could take the cranberry sauce, the cream corn, I could load up a bag like the Grinch and take every morsel of food he has, and he ain't doing nothing. But anyway, Francesca, before we move on to the dark twist in this, what do you think about Ted Cruz focusing as we launch into what is going to be one of the most deadly Thanksgivings ever recorded on the fact that you ain't taking his drumstick?
I mean, you know, I think that his Weight Watchers app is probably maxing out, and it's like, look, Teddy, you and I both know you've been over your calorie count every single week now. Quarantine's added them pounds, and not just in the gullet that you've tried to, you know, paper over with that disgusting possum beard. But I've said, you know, that let's just break a few things down. One, corny. You're corny, Ted Cruz. You've always been corny. That shirt, I said this on Twitter, looks like it's been, you know, was passed over 10,000 times at like a triple XL plus Men's Warehouse novelty gift store, right? Like, hey, big guy, you want to come and take it? Turkey shirt? Like, no, that's lame, no. Also,
you're insane.
If you did go and take Ted Cruz's turkey, I know what he would do. He'd be just like, his hands would be all buttery, and he'd be, it'd just be this like blubbery, like a little bit of turkey skin on the corner of his mouth. Like, how dare?
It gets stuck in the beard.
It'll just get stuck in the beard. He's corny. Secondly, so irresponsible. You're a senator. What? We are surging. Like, what is it? 4 million cases? Just, I wish you were corny in ways that were a little bit more in line with reality, then I might forgive you. But how irresponsible is it, especially in Texas, and I know we're gonna talk about what's going on there, to put that out, for the Republicans to weaponize Thanksgiving as if you hate your family, you hate turkey. No, we don't. We love our families. We like turkey, or we're vegetarian, except we break that once a year when we eat turkey. Guilty. But like, come on. It's not funny anymore. It's actually really upsetting because people are gonna die.
It is corny. I wish that he was corny in a way that didn't get as many people killed. Although, as many people have pointed out, it is sort of honoring the tradition for Thanksgiving to once again become about selfish white people passing a fatal disease on to other people. So here's the sad thing. The pandemic is actually a big deal, and it is devastating across the country, but it is devastating in Texas as well. So while Ted Cruz, who's been chosen by the people of Texas recently as their leader, is posting cartoon turkeys on Twitter, El Paso inmates are helping move bodies into morgues as COVID deaths soar. There were so many bodies piling up that they had to use prison labor to try to move them. And when that proved to be not enough, they had to do this. Take a look at this video. Yeah, so that's Texas National Guard soldiers being brought in, strapping on full PPE to start moving the piled up mountains of corpses that Texas is generating. Probably in no small part due to the fact that their political leaders think the entire thing is a joke. And Ted Cruz is the most laughable version of this. He hasn't pretended to care about Texans dying from COVID in more than half a year, but he's not the only one. Their governor is talking about how any sort of restrictions on Thanksgiving is anathema to the holiday and all of that. And so you can expect that the corpses you just saw piling up in that video get a load of a month from now, after the lack of leadership of people like Ted Cruz in Texas.
The dissonance is upsetting. It's stark. It's ridiculous. I mean, this is. We never really saw this coming, right? You know, like just the ways that Republicans denied reality didn't usually come at us so quickly in the form of body bags. But like I said, and I know that people have been protesting in this way, those body bags belong at Ted Cruz's doorstep. And I would like to see him, first of all, he couldn't move a dead body because he doesn't have the upper body strength, number one. But number two, he doesn't have the stomach for it, or the heroism for it, or the ability to do anything that's minorly disgusting. He doesn't like clean the hair, all the beard hair out of the drain, that kind of thing. He's got very soft hands, Ted Cruz does. But like, you should be on the front lines. You should be there greeting those soldiers as they come in to help move these bodies of the people and the loved ones who probably did gather with family, who probably did feel like it was safe. And who did not deserve to die, and whose blood you have on your hands, man. So, I mean, I don't look. If this were a war, once again, it's like if the enemy were what they love, which is Islam, what else? Women. If it were just Muslim
Black
women,
protesters.
like yes, BLM protesters, like. Where the red carpet would have been rolled out, right? You know, for any of the people, any of the wars they really want to go, you know, and fight hard. But this, nah, best to leave it, sweep it under the rug. And notice how the camera's kind of at a distance, right? It's like that's their shot. That's all they get. This is not being amplified very much on a lot of media. So that's what you get. You get your shot around the fence, and that gets shared on Twitter.
Yeah.
And those people doing that, those troops deserve better. They deserve more recognition. They deserve an interview. I mean, I don't know if they're allowed to, but that is so traumatic and awful.
Yeah, and unfortunately, in a very real sense, people like Ted Cruz and Jesse Waters and the Crowders and all of those right-wing grifters, they're gonna get what they want this Thanksgiving, which is a lot of people spending time together and a lot of people dying. TSA did more than 3 million screenings between Friday and Sunday, the highest 3-day total since mid-March. So the most travel during the pandemic happening at the time where we have by far the most cases already. I'm not great with recipes, but I know what dish this produces. Let's bear in mind that Ted Cruz is not just a weakling and a pathetic possum-faced loser. He's also an idiot. And so he says a lot of dumb stuff to chase political right-wing clout, assuming, probably rightly, that most people will forget about the stupid things that he says. Well, we're gonna try to remember when we can. So I want you to take a look at what he had to say back on July 22nd. This amazing prognosticator, Ted Cruz, here's what he thought was likely to happen later this year.
If it ends up that Biden wins in November, I hope he doesn't, I don't think he will, but if he does, I guarantee you the week after the election, suddenly all those Democratic governors, all those Democratic mayors will say, everything's magically better. Go back to work, go back to school. Suddenly the problems are solved. You won't even have to wait for Biden to be sworn in. All they'll need is election day. And suddenly their willingness to just destroy people's lives and livelihoods, they will have accomplished their task. That's wrong. It's cynical. And we shouldn't be a part of it.
I love when he does his like fake stutter thing because he thinks it adds gravitas. Like he's getting so worked up that he's not sure what to say. It is so artificial. What a possum-faced loser, as I said. Yes, it's the Democratic mayors that are trying to destroy people's lives. As Ted Cruz is using the platform he has to encourage as many people as possible to gather in a tiny space and give each other COVID for Thanksgiving. That's fun. And he couldn't be more wrong. And does it matter? No, because people getting things wrong, even at the expense of people's lives, has long since ceased to matter in America.
Yeah, because it's all about the invisible hand of the market, which has its hand, right up our butts at this point. Let's never forget that they've put the market, they've put their stocks above people's lives. This isn't about the economy. This is not about small businesses. Otherwise, those small businesses would still be around. They would have gotten those PPP loans, right? They don't. They didn't. Otherwise, unemployment benefits would be extended. Otherwise, people would be paid to stay home. They don't care about business, actual small businesses. They care about their portfolios. They care about the stock market. They care about getting out and getting out good. And they don't care how many people's lives have to be sacrificed to the market as long as the economy comes first. And only a very, very small understanding again of what that economy actually is. Exactly. And that's the thing, we're gonna keep going. I mean, I think someone in the chat was saying about lockdowns, like this is absolutely what's going to keep happening. We need to depoliticize lockdowns as much as we can. And you saw Ted Cruz trying to politicize it when the opposite is happening, right? We know that Biden and Kamala Harris have already convoked like the first task force around coronavirus, and they're not even in office. Meanwhile, Trump is golfing for what? How many times since the pandemic started? So sadly, this is all on us, and it is on us to be tested and tested and tested, to not take a flight, to not, be in close quarters with our family members, to try and to wear masks, to eat outside, to say hi and then leave. I mean, there's just like a lot of things we can do, and it's being the weird one, being the like paranoid one, because hey, that paranoia is really going to save you. That is going to be the difference. In the time coming forward, because there is no leadership and it sucks. But that's what we're stuck with, and we're stuck with knowing that. I mean, I'm sitting here and I'm like, God, how can cases be rising? I've literally said I've seen no one, like, see my mom for the first time in 6 months, and I'm like, but am I doing something wrong? And then you think, no, I don't even leave. I don't gather. I don't do anything. I've never eaten in a restaurant outside. Like I don't even do that. So it's frustrating, but I can't even say there's a light at the end of the tunnel. Who knows? But we have to keep doing this.
Theoretically, there are vaccines, but it's still a long way away. And until then, there are gonna be people who, like you say, take it super seriously. And in exchange for that, they get to say things like, I get to say, I don't have COVID and I haven't had COVID, which is kind of nice. Don Jr. can like joke about it on Twitter, but he's also got COVID. So the joke's on him and the disease is on him, more importantly. Now, there are also people that unfortunately, because our country has decided screw you if you're working class. We're gonna give you a tiny bit of help for a tiny period of time, and then you're on your own. Yeah. There have been plenty of people that have been forced due to their economic circumstances to engage with the world, and many of them have gotten COVID, many of them have died. That is a shame that should never be forgiven, that our country allowed that to happen, made the choice for that to happen. But then there's also a lot of entitled, stupid a-holes that are so selfish that they will infect not only themselves, but others with this disease, all while making insane, stupid predictions like Ted Cruz. And it wasn't just Ted Cruz. Donald Trump was saying things like this.
It's COVID, COVID, COVID. You can't watch anything else. On November 4th, you won't be hearing so much about it.
Except that you will, because the cases were rising on November 4th, and they still are. And he was tweeting, oh, the fake news media wants to talk about is COVID, COVID, COVID. On November 4th, you won't be hearing so much about it anymore. We're rounding the turn. And he kept saying it. At least 40 times he said that the virus would go away. But again, it wasn't just him. It was even like his lesser child, Eric Trump, saying it's just a ploy to stop his campaign. It will magically disappear. Does he have COVID? Not yet. He'll get it next week.
Soon,
you have idiot grifters like Dave Rubin saying, can we all admit that the pandemic is over now? Like, at least give us that as you peddle the rest of this nonsense. On November 5th, as cases were rising, and they're still rising, and a couple thousand people are dying every day. But again, America has made the decision that we are going to pay people and give them power based on how much they say things that make me feel warm and nice inside, not the distance between what they say and the truth. Yep. That's a decision we've made, and so we get grifters like this in media and politics.
Yes. But we will not rise to this challenge. We will bury our head in the sand and say that we're macho for doing so and deny, deny, deny until it comes knocking on our door. And then we'll still deny it. You know, we last week, John, you and I did that story and we talked about nurses who are attending patients who are still in disbelief, who still believe COVID is not real. You know, and like we all think that we're above it. We think, oh yeah, you know, well I believe it and therefore I'm taking precautions. But it's amazing how it trickles down. It's amazing how these idiots who, you're right, have been upheld as somehow leaders, how even their idiocy or their fake machismo does trickle down to everyday folks who might otherwise believe something like this. As if like, oh yeah, we're in the know. We know that it's fake. We're cool because we know it's fake. No. It's unprecedented. We are in crazy times. It's okay to feel crazy, but like, kind of like, take your hat off to history, bro. We're not even in a studio. I mean, this is how, John, how long have we been in quarantine and in our homes doing this show? You just got back to the studio by yourself, just you and the daddy long legs up in there. You know, it's crazy times. We're all making sacrifices, and yeah, it's one for the history books. So deal with it.
It is, yeah, it 100% is. What is Biden's cabinet gonna look like? Well, it depends on who you talk to. If you get your news from Fox Business, they just make up whatever they think will scare their audience the most. This was a screenshot tweeted by Ilhan Omar. It says everyone at Fox truly lives in an alternate universe. So if you're listening to the podcast, this is graphics from Varney and Co. about what his cabinet will look like. With Ilhan Omar as the Secretary of Homeland Security, Rashida Tlaib in charge of the Department of Justice. I guess she's the AG. Elizabeth Warren's in charge of Treasury. Bernie Sanders is the Defense Secretary, sure. And Andrew Yang is in charge of Transportation. Why are any of those there? I guess because Varney thinks that will terrify his audience. And the idea of Ilhan Omar, oh my God, she's got a hijab on and she's gonna be in charge of Homeland Security, the horror. This is their nightmare in this graphic. It doesn't make any sense to me. Who is talking about Bernie Sanders being the defense secretary? I'd love it, but who's actually talking about that?
This is what a dream team. Yes, once again, Fox News graphics team, just like, threatening progressives with a good time, as they've been saying. And yeah, I definitely feel, I mean, God, it's not gonna happen, sadly, but only Muslim Americans should be in charge of the defense of this country, because I have a feeling that would stop endless war very soon, because we seem to be really obsessed with invading majority Muslim countries over the last 30 years or 40 or 50 or whatever. And Bernie is defense secretary, yes, yeah. Right? I feel like it'll just be like teaching you how to build a fire, with which to burn down all of our military bases abroad that are unnecessary. Not burning, dismantling and selling for parts. No,
just turning into affordable housing.
Yes, absolutely. For the local communities that we've devastated with our F-16s and whatnot. If only, John, we can, one day.
100%. No, you're 100% right. Yeah, no, okay, sure. Ilhan Omar, head of Homeland Security. Let's try that out. Bernie Sanders, head of Defense Secretary. They weren't originally gonna be my picks, but you're scared of it. And because you are literally 100% wrong about everything having to do with defending this country, I guess the opposite must be right. How about this as a general rule? When you've been uncritically supportive of our entire Republican defense apparatus that failed to protect human life in America worse than anyone in human history has ever done, maybe you don't get to choose who's in charge anymore. After all, you were cheerleading them as 250,000 Americans died from this virus. Now you might say, well, come on, is that really a fair comparison? I mean, it's not a military invasion. That's the thing, it isn't. It's a public health crisis that we should have dealt with. But you've been saying it was China sending it to us. Our adversary, China, that you hate, sent a biological weapon in here, and you guys let 250,000 people die. So maybe you shouldn't be in charge anymore. Maybe someone who actually wants to stop this wanton loss of American life on a daily basis should be in charge. I think we could do a lot worse than Bernie Sanders in that respect. But anyway, what's interesting is that sort of graphic has no relationship to what Biden is actually choosing. And at some point, as the choices come in, and we're gonna get to some of the choices in a minute, some of Fox has to actually respond to that. But don't worry, they've found a way to get around the fact that they predicted it would be filled with insane red radicals. Here's Fox and Friends this morning.
Our names that Fox News has been told are pretty much a done deal. We will not, however, know until tomorrow when the appointments are officially announced by.
And they have to get confirmed.
Oh, they do, and that's why they're going more for the centrists than the radicals. And so far what we have seen, we haven't seen any of those radical names, Ainsley.
And I will do absolutely nothing to integrate that into my worldview going forward. This prediction I made that was based on nothing and is being proven to be 100% false, I'm gonna move on from that without learning anything. But don't worry, it's not that Biden is like literally the like if you looked for establishment centrist Democrat in the dictionary, his face would be there. It's not that. It's he really wants communists in all these positions, but he'd have to get them confirmed. So he's going with the centrists that we predicted he would have all along. That's probably what it is.
Doesn't matter who he picks. It does. I mean, that's the thing. It's like we might as well go with Bernie Sanders or Elizabeth Warren for Treasury because it doesn't matter. They're all gonna be far left. It really doesn't matter.
By their very nature.
By their very nature.
Yeah, exactly. And so right there, Ainsley Earhart, I think is her name, said, don't worry, they still have to be confirmed because now all of a sudden that sort of oversight matters. And I mean, there's nothing Biden could do. I mean, he wouldn't like put in acting heads of these departments without them being confirmed. I mean, that would be crazy. They'd lose it. In the same way, presumably, that Fox and Friends has been losing it for 4 years because under Trump, acting officials have held down 22 cabinet and cabinet level jobs for a combined 2,700 days, about 1 out of every 9. But just for minor things like, Homeland Security for more than a year, the OMB, or indeed the chief of staff himself, the EPA, the Defense Department, the VA, the Director of National Intelligence, Health and Human Services with a pandemic, the Secretary of State, Labor, the Attorney General, virtually all of these had acting heads because Donald Trump couldn't be bothered to have a Republican Senate confirm his picks. But Joe Biden should definitely abide by whatever Mitch McConnell's okay with, I think.
Right, I mean, didn't we just learn last week that like Chad Wolf has been like acting illegally for like 9 months or however long he's been in office? Like everything he says, we should not have ever listened to. This is the guy who's got the destiny and fate of thousands of migrants in his hands. Supposedly has like teams like BORTAC special military units deploying to major American cities because of him. I mean, like this is, again, we talk about this, but back to the norms that we need to do away with because we need to make laws. You can't have an acting secretary for more than X amount of time. Otherwise they're out, done, right? Removal. You don't have to listen to their orders. Yeah. They don't get the lower third.
I agree.
They don't get the lower
100% agree. And suddenly, they're going to care about that going forward. I just love that, just pretend that they were always going to be radicals. Oh, they're not radicals? Does he get any credit then? Since you didn't want them to be radicals and now they're not, does he get any? No, he doesn't get any credit. Not from you. Okay. Well, you'll also be shocked to find out.
Just you wait. The epiphany, the Republican epiphany is coming that Biden was talking about.
Bipartisanship. I can hear it on the wind. Bit of breaking news, new cabinet level picks being chosen by Joe Biden, the president-elect. Simply saying that is a radical statement in America, apparently. But some of them include John Kerry being the climate envoy. Don't love that. DNI Avril Haines. So girl power coming to the director of national intelligence. That's going to be awesome. And then also, most importantly, the biggest one is Secretary of State Antony Blinken, who, look, I'm not going to say that I was super familiar with his work before this announcement, but I'm learning stuff as a result of it, and so far not loving it. We'll get into some of the details, but what was your reaction, Francesca?
Well, so Antony Blinken, looking and learning a little bit more about him, it seems like he was deputy to the Secretary of State, I guess, under Obama, which is always good because you're you kind of want someone who saw the way that their boss effed up and is like, I'm gonna do it different. He is an internationalist, or if you're Alex Jones, a globalist, meaning he is aware there is a world outside of the United States, and we might have to work with that world if we want, peace and stuff. And that's always good. He lived abroad, apparently in Paris for a long time. So did James Baldwin, so that's a point in his favor. Love that. He plays the guitar and he plays soccer. So clearly, an elitist coastal globalist, i.e., pretty much like anyone who's cool and is relatable, plays the guitar and and soccer. So whether or not he's actually going to make change, whether he's not, I do think come on, it's a step in the right direction. So happy about that.
Sure.
And happy to give him a chance going forward and pressure him when it comes to what we all know is really important, which is making sure that the United States has an actual standing in this world. And I don't mean George W. Bush intervention, wars of aggression standing, right? I don't mean 94 Bill Clinton NAFTA standing. I mean being leaders of demilitarization, being leaders in climate, in the climate crisis, being leaders in diplomacy. Can I get a woot for diplomacy? No, okay, that's fine.
Yeah, that's funny. No, I love your method of vetting him based on his hobbies. It's a method that has only previously been used for Pete Buttigieg circa the Democratic primary, if you recall that. But yeah, so let's talk about him, because obviously going back to that era of foreign policy under Obama, which we've all sort of been assuming is what we're gonna go back to, and it looks like we're not only gonna be going back to it, but with literally the same cast of characters, has some good and some bad. But I wanna read a few of these graphics because one of them has a little turn of phrase that I think just does so much work that's great. So really fast. So choosing not only Antony Blinken, but also people like Linda Thomas Greenfield as ambassador to the UN sends a signal to our allies that blah, 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 we're gonna be involved in world affairs again, which some of that isn't necessarily bad. Blinken was Biden's national security advisor when Biden was vice president, and then served as deputy secretary of state in the last 2 years of the Obama administration, was involved with things like the creation of the nuclear accord. So that's where, in theory, engaging in the world via diplomacy can result in a cessation of hostilities and tension rather than an escalation of it. So that's the good side. The bad side, though, is things like this, and I just love this. In that role, Mr. Blinken helped develop the American response to political upheaval and instability across the Middle East, with mixed results in Egypt, Iraq, Syria, and Libya. Those mixed results. The letters are straining under the weight of all of what they have to contain. Mixed results in Egypt, Iraq, Syria, and Libya. I guess what's mixed implies that there was some good too, and I'm not sure that I'm really seeing much. It's been chaos. It's been widespread death and destabilization. I don't get the mix though.
I mean, I think, interestingly and in a really good way, moving forward, and especially with someone like Biden, gives us a chance to look back on what was good and what was bad about Obama's foreign policy. And sorry to say, progressives and lefties, it wasn't all bad. It wasn't, right? I mean, the way that Kerry worked to ease tensions with Cuba, I mean, that barely happened, right? That narrowly happened. The Republicans hated it, and it only was announced when it was actually done. So a little bit of easing of the embargo, easing travel restrictions, that was huge. Obviously, the Iran deal, huge, right? Also, the right hated it, but they were arguable successes. Egypt, we gave so much money to LCC and the military dictatorship, the military regime there. Syria didn't invade, which is great, really important. Gave a lot of arms to maybe unfavorable and not so wholesome entities we gave arms to. But Syria was, I mean, that is a whole episode we could do. It's a whole can of worms. A lot of people, even Syrians themselves, feel like the US didn't do enough. To me, as someone who doesn't believe in intervention, is like, no, we shouldn't have done anything, right? Iraq and Libya, we know was a disaster, but these are all great conversations, and I'm so excited to be having them under some kind of less awful American presidency.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Look, you're 100% right. It is frustrating because, of course, he has been a part of going along into a number of disastrous and some still ongoing international crises, like the war on Yemen, obviously the continued death in Syria and all that. And you're right. In theory, those situations could have been even worse. Hopefully this individual has learned something in the intervening years where he co-founded a political strategy advising firm. But anyway, there will be some good. There will probably be quite a bit of bad. We begin this coverage just to let people know sort of what the form of the fight we're about to engage in is going to look like, where there are some opportunities and where there are some causes for alarm as well. We're gonna obviously talk more about Blinken as it goes forward. But yeah, what it is looking like is Biden is going to largely choose the sort of cabinet we would have predicted, with a good amount of representation of the non-ideological sorts. Like there's not necessarily a lot of breadth of disagreement on ideology. They tend to fit in that sort of Obama-style democratic politics, which has upsides, and all of it is upside in comparison to the insanity that we're now trying to transition out of. But it's still gonna have a lot of the same sorts of issues that we were talking about every day back under the previous president.
Yes, and also, by the way, just going forward, when it comes to foreign policy, right wingers are going to continue to argue that Trump was and is an isolationist, and that is utter BS. First year, mother of all bombs in Afghanistan. Increased drone strikes, exponentially increased drone strikes. We think Obama is the drone king? Nuh-uh, not compared to Trump. From that to the bombing in Syria, like he's not an isolationist, he never was and he never will be, and all of that is BS. So let's just remember that he's a hawk and don't buy into that just because he said he didn't like the war in Iraq. Please, he said he would have taken all the oil. So yes, as we move forward, I'm excited to have these discussions, but let's not forget that the right wing is gonna be gaslighting us about how they were so peaceful and they sicked their own military on their own people. They brought the war home.
Yeah, no, you're 100% right. Yeah, he couldn't even stop himself from intervening in DC.
Exactly.
In other countries.
Exactly.
That's a great point, and let's try to remember that. Yeah, it's gonna be a very interesting transition period to what do people remember and what do people forget of these years. We're gonna have to watch and see what lessons are learned, which are attempted to be like invented based on a selective forgetting of this time. Great point. But that said, we are out of our time. Francesca Fiorentini, as always, thank you so much for joining us. Great to have you here. Where can people watch more of your fantastic work?
Oh, thank you. Watch News Broke on AJ Plus on YouTube. Watch The Bituation Room every Sunday on my YouTube /Franny Fio. Listen to it as a podcast and follow me on all the social medias. And giving you all a big virtual hug, and you as well, John, I guess.
Thank you. I like the reluctant hug. Thank you, Francesca. Have a good one.
You too.
Long before 2020, the economic situation in terms of job prospects, wage growth, accessibility of housing, the possibility of owning a home, these are all issues that many Americans, especially millennials, were dealing with. And then 2020 happened on top of it, making almost all of these situations worse for tens of millions of Americans. Well, into that gap, some corporations are trying to make things a little bit better, help to fill that gap economically for a lot of the people that are struggling. And we're joined now by an individual who's working to fix a few of those problems. Ankur Jain is the founder and co-CEO of Kairos. Welcome to the Damage Report.
Hey, John, thanks for having me.
Glad to have you here. Right before we went live, we were talking about one of the most recent initiatives that came about as a result of the pandemic. Talk to me a little bit about what Kairos is doing in terms of renters and some of the economic pressure that they've been feeling.
Yeah, I mean, look, taking a step back, John, I feel like this is the most typical 2020 moment for millennials, but it's not only are we facing our second once in a lifetime financial crisis, but at a moment where we finally could use like getting back on our feet, and we're finally getting a chance to get ahead. This crisis puts the majority of unemployment on our generation. And one of the problems that we've been dealing with is rent prices haven't gone down yet because most people are locked into 1-year leases. People haven't gotten a stimulus check because the federal government hasn't been able to get our act together with the president in office right now. And so the question we've been trying to figure out is how in the world do we put money back into people's pockets now, rather than waiting when people have a rent bill to make next month. People are gonna start getting evicted at the end of the year. And so we started figuring out ways to use some of the innovation we've been building to create a $45 billion stimulus check program that's quickly now being rolled out by mayors across the country. So John, I don't know if you've seen this, but there are $45 billion of cash locked up in security deposits across the United States. Just think about it. That's money that people like you and I have earned. The average American has less than $1,400 or less than $400 in emergency savings, and yet you have $1,500 on average tied up per renter in a security deposit, right? Mm-hmm. Now, when you go rent a car, they don't say, hey, John, just in case you get into an accident, I need you to give me $10,000, and don't worry, I'll maybe give it back to you at the end of your car rental, right? So the idea that you have to do that for housing makes no sense. And so just like with rental cars, we created deposit insurance. So you can pay $5 a month, your landlord's protected, and those thousands of dollars go back into your pocket. And so just in the last couple months, John, we've now put $200 million back into the pockets of millennials across the country. And we're now working with mayors, including Mayor Cranley in Cincinnati, Mayor Bottoms in Atlanta. We worked with Governor Cuomo here in New York. And we've actually been passing these policies that give every millennial renter access to their security deposit immediately.
You know, I want to talk more about some of the cities that you're doing this in, but you were mentioning the overall amount of money that's effectively wrapped up in security deposits, which I had never heard cited before. That's actually a crazy amount of money. Do you happen to know offhand? Because look, you've probably had the same experience. I've dealt with trying to get it back once I'm done, in an apartment that I left in perfectly fine condition. Do we know on average what percentage of those security deposits people tend to get back? Like, we just assume that you're gonna get that money inevitably. How much do people tend to get back?
It really varies by city and by housing type, John, but that's why insurance works for this type of thing. It's that you shouldn't be taking money out of people's pockets just because of what if, right? Especially at a time like right now when people need that money. I mean, think about how much effort went into the bickering at the federal government level for a $50 billion stimulus the first time around, right? I mean, to be able to do that overnight without without having to affect any crazy tax policies, without having to hurt landlords, putting that money back into millennial pockets now, I mean, that's a big, big deal. And I mean, look, it's not just how much you get back. The problem is, to your point, you could be the best renter, have no history of damage. You could leave an apartment in perfectly good shape, but your landlord might just turn around and say, you know what? I like that scratch on that wall. That cost me $500. I'm keeping your money, right? There's nothing you can do about it. And so by putting this money back into people's pockets, you're not only reducing the upfront cost of housing by 50% and putting the average of $1,500 back into someone's pocket, but you're also balancing that power dynamic between the renter and the landlord, which doesn't exist today.
You know, you mentioned sort of how we now have this long period where the federal government hasn't really done much. So I'm curious, as you mentioned a few of the cities that you've been rolling this out in, the legislation that's being worked on. Have you found that are there like red cities, red states that are interested in these sorts of programs?
Yeah, I mean, look, over 60% of millennials are renters across the country, right? So while this has been a huge impact in major cities like New York, which is obviously the most expensive rental market in the country, I mean, you're seeing this type of issue across the country, right? And so if you look at like Cincinnati, where this bill was passed, that's going to put $100 million back into renters' pockets in just Cincinnati, right? In Miami, where Mayor Suarez is working on this, you're talking about just over $1 billion that's right now sitting there unusable by renters. I think these are the kind of common sense solutions, right? At the end of the day, we need, especially in times like these, to find creative, common sense things that just help our generation today. And that's a lot of what we're trying to do with Kairos. I mean, the other thing, John, I don't know if you and I talked about this before, but the other problem we're dealing with is a lot of the jobs people are losing aren't coming back in the next 3, 6, 12 months. And so at Kairos, we've been thinking a lot about kind of what do we do to get millennials back on our feet quickly so we don't have a 10-year period to recover like we did after 2008. And so we were looking at the jobs being lost in hospitality, travel, restaurants, the service area, largely millennial jobs, and thinking, where do those skills apply where there's a growing number of jobs? And what we realized is that actually there's a perfect match opportunity. Healthcare right now has a huge shortage of workforce. In fact, just to take care of our senior population, we're short almost 500,000 caregivers, right? Those are jobs that can be filled today. And what's exciting about those jobs is people can get trained and get their kind of entry-level certification in less than 30 days. So we can take people and get them back to work and start a career in healthcare where you can grow into different nursing opportunities, even eventually become a registered nurse, which pays quite well, right? And so we actually launched a program where we've been funding 10,000 people across the United Kingdom and 10,000 people here in the US each to get trained as healthcare workers to help get people back on their feet. And then we've been partnering with people like Richard Branson to say, hey, look, if you're gonna have to lay people off of your airline, let's give them a soft landing. Let's give them access to free training, and let's put people back to work in a way that can help take care of the most vulnerable in our country while creating jobs for young people.
So, I mean, it's obviously a really interesting idea, and the demand for that is almost certainly only going to increase. How does rolling out that sort of program during this ongoing pandemic, which is getting worse right now, although we do have vaccines supposedly coming and the federal government is about to experience a massive turnover, how does that influence the rollout of that sort of program?
I mean, look, right now, that need is greater and growing despite, I mean, even before COVID, we had a shortage, right? And if you've seen the most recent data, I think it was 40% of the deaths from COVID have unfortunately happened in senior care facilities, right? These are old people homes, nursing homes across the country. And so there's a immediate need to give families a chance to affordably get their loved ones out of those nursing homes and hopefully get them care in the comfort of their own home. The challenge is that there's just not enough people who can provide that care in the homes, right? And so by getting people trained, again, you can create those jobs today and also reduce the cost for many of these families of being able to do that.
Yeah. Well, really fascinating ideas, and certainly there's a lot of need out there. Like you're talking about some of these jobs going away, and we don't even yet know exactly how bad it's going to get with the way the numbers are looking right now. So certainly appreciate you and Kairos being out there coming up with ideas like this. Ankur Jain, really appreciate you joining us on the show today. Thank you.
Thanks for having me, John.
Thanks for listening to the full episode of The Damage Report. Support our work, listen ad-free, access members-only bonus content, and more by subscribing to Apple Podcasts at apple.co/TYT. I'm your host, John Adarola. I'll see you soon.